Welcome back to another edition of Ruck and Maul. It's Greg Growden alongside Sam Bruce. Greg, we're coming to the punters this week after a horrendous weekend for Australian rugby. 4 losses from 4 games.
It was diabolical. It was horrendous viewing, loss after loss after loss. And now we've really got to say what is going on here, because you've really only got one team that looks finals candidate, and they got beaten as well. The Waratahs, you couldn't really put money on them to say they're going to get back in the top 6. They're just too erratic. So, yeah, it's worrying times for Australian rugby.
What does it mean in the World Cup year? We saw obviously 4 years ago the Reds won the Super Rugby, Wallabies won the Tri-Nations, and then we went like bustards at the World Cup. How is this going to influence? Is it a major worry? Is it only a little concern? What's Michael Cheika thinking?
Well, I think Cheika would start to be worried that there's not combinations happening at the moment, and also there's been some rather crucial injuries. I think he'd be really worried. I think he'd be probably more worried than the 4 losses than seeing Scott Seo and Matt Tamura away from the Brumbies, because you had a situation there where you had Nick White and Matt Tamura working well together, so that could possibly be a test combination later in the year. And you had Scott Seo performing well with Stephen Moore, who's likely to be the test hooker. So those combinations are crucial. And now that there is doubts whether these 2 guys will be back for a couple of months. So, you know, you lose all that momentum, which is important. No, I don't think Michael Cheika would be waving the white flag yet, but he needs teams to be going pretty well so he can. No, it engenders confidence. When teams are going badly, it affects everything. No, you don't have to win the Super Rugby tournament to say you're going to win the World Cup. It doesn't correlate. But it is good if you've got teams going well.
You created quite a stir this week with your column on Monday. Yes, you did.
Really?
Writing that Australia should come back to 3 teams instead of 5.
Yeah, I've thought this for quite a while. I've just got, you watch these games and you look that each team, there's a couple of players on each of those sides, you say, are they really of Super Rugby standard? And you go back to when they did have 3 teams, Australian rugby was strong because you were able to create these combinations. You were able to have 8 or 9 players in one team successfully then move into the test side. Now it's all over the place. My concern is that the standard is slipping, and you've also got situations where, oh no, we need the 4th and 5th team. Well, you have a look at the 5th team, the Force, well, they've got South African players in crucial spots. So they're not using that to develop players. So, no, I've thought this for a long while, and just last weekend has reinforced it that I know it's not going to happen because expansions to go, probably Australia wants 20 teams, but I think the standard was so much better when we had 3.
I hear what you're saying, but at a time when we're worried about our younger players going off overseas, obviously there's massive money in Japan, France, England, those guys will go and yet will then whinge that they didn't have the teams available to them to play here in Australia.
Well, but also, they're talking about money. Money's the main reason why they go, not opportunities. You see most of the guys go, and a lot of them are already in the Super Rugby teams. If you only had 3 teams, the amount of money pool will be far more than with 5. You know, the distribution will be higher. So the amount of money for those 3 provinces will be enormous. So they'll be able to offer the amount of money to keep them here. So there are different ways around this as well. You know, the complaint I hear from a lot of people this week after my story came out, oh, we can't have it all based in New South Wales, Queensland, ACT. Well, there's ways around it. What you can do, you can have the Force, if you want to keep them, get them playing in the South African Conference. You know, there's a strong link there. They're only 8 or 9 hours away. And also, you have a look at the crowds of the Brumbies. Why not relocate them? Why don't you relocate them to Melbourne? So you have this expansion going. There are ways of doing it, but I still think they've got to seriously look at some way of making these Australian teams stronger, because it's not good when you see Australian teams losing week after week after week. The whole interest goes. And you have a look at the crowds, and you talk to Foxtel, their figures are not great.
So we've got 3 underperforming Australian teams. We've got an extra team coming in South Africa next year, 1 Argentina team and an Asian team going to be based in Japan. Do you hold fears for the integrity of Super Rugby?
Well, the interesting thing is maybe 2 of these teams will be okay. The Argentina team will be tremendous for their rugby championship thing, because they'll basically use that as a test trial. And Japan can use it as a go. So those teams will be okay. I think another South African team is a complete waste of time. No one wants to watch him anyway, so why need another one? So expansion, I just think you're diluting a pretty weak product at the moment, whereas you should be strengthening it. I know it's not going to happen, but it's, you're just putting a noose around your own neck.
The other big story last week was, of course, Michael Cheika's halftime visit to referee Jaco Piper there between the Waratahs and Blues the other week. Created quite a stir, allegations of a Sanzar cover-up, and then they found that he'd actually committed no foul at all and cleared him of any wrongdoing, thus not activating that suspended sentence he's got from that cameraman incident last year.
It's very baffling, the whole thing. I just thought this whole process was crazy, that it only came out after the New Zealand Herald started pushing it. No one knew about this investigation, and there seemed to be a lot of scuffling going on at the time. And yes, it's very strange that, you know, I know Michael Cheika is very surprised that this has come out in the open, but you know, I think he's lucky. I think he's very lucky because, you know, the laws are pretty, you know, this code of conduct's pretty thing. You stay away from the referees, but there apparently is a lot more to this story. But, you know, the whole Sanzar thing has really been bothering me for a while, how the judicial decisions have been strange. There seems to be a lack of consistency in a lot of levels. And I find also that Sanzar at times when they should be far more open to the press aren't.
Do you expect the New Zealand media to really hammer home on Cheika for the rest of the year?
Yes, they've got a hobby horse, and you'll have Steve Hansen will work on it. You have Dave Rennie going on it. The New Zealand Herald have got every right to be knocked off because they seriously believe that what Cheika did was wrong, and how the Sanzar have operated and done it has been a bit amateur. So they'll keep pushing it, and that will keep going. And now we've also got South Africa on the bandwagon. We had Regan Hoskins, the South African Rugby Union president, who's a very powerful man in world rugby, complaining about the judiciary hearings, and it's putting a bit of pressure on the Sanzar boss, Greg Peters. So the whole Sanzar situation is very, very rocky at the moment.
Where do you see it going then with Sanzar in the future? Obviously, they're committed to this expansion next year. You've got Greg Peters under pressure. Is this governing body just a little bit shaky?
Well, the interesting thing is that I think what you'll find is that the three partners, Australia, South Africa and New Zealand, will have a close look at this, because there's even complaints that Sanzar is based in Sydney, and they think they've got too stronger links to the local team. So New Zealand and South Africa will ramp it up. They'll keep stirring it up. And at the moment, when they think they're unfairly maligned, they will really push it. So maybe it might be a chance. Sanzar might have to spend a year having an office in Bloemfontein to calm them down, then have a sub-office maybe in Palmerston North to keep them going. So, yeah, this story is worth following, because I think there's going to be more ramifications.
I'm sure Greg Peters would love to relocate to Bloemfontein. Another big week in rugby. Stay tuned to it all at espnscrum.com.